Welcome to the C-Suite Sales and Marketing Perspectives podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host. And today we have a super interesting conversation with Ramya. And Ramya, you are the Vice President of Growth and Demand at TaskUs. And TaskUs is a big company. I want you to explain a little bit about TaskUs, your role there. But here's what's interesting. You call yourself a tech optimist. You said we've lived through this app economy, cloud infrastructure, now AI is taking over the world. And all of that means that we have more tools at our disposal than ever, right? And so in charge of marketing, it should be getting easier and easier. But here's one trend that's happening. There's a consistent line that we're not getting the respect inside of our organizations that we need to. We're looked upon as the support department as, hey, if you're not creating really high quality leads, what's your role here? So there's a bit of an identity crisis, and this is very real. I talk to chief marketing officers, CROs, CEOs every day, and inside of some of the biggest CMO communities, the imposter syndrome is talked about on a regular basis. So this is not just that's a funny thing to say. This is real. So we're going to talk about CMO turnaround, addressing the identity crisis head on. But before you help us do that, I'd love just to hear a little bit more about your background before we get started.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Steve. Absolutely. I think it's been really fascinating. Been really lucky part of every single kind of S curve of technology that we've been going through over the past, I want to say 20 years, and being in marketing communications and brand management through that and helping brands navigate that has been really fascinating because you're absolutely right. It's been watching the shift in how consumers, end users, all of us are changing the way we live, operate every single day. Tech has made it easier for us in many ways, but it's also created gaps in the ways we connect with each other. All of social media promise was that we would make the world more connected and that we would be more closely connected with each other. But instead, we find that we're more disconnected from each other. We're living more isolated than we were. Ideas now feel more siloed than they were. And in this reality, as marketers, like how do you take that idea? How do you bring it to life? And how do you attach your brand to it? And how do you really create that art of possible when the connectivity feels weaker rather than stronger? And if we are the arbiters of trust within our organizations and within our communities, what is the role that we play? How do we bring that to life? And it's really changed the way I view marketing. It's changed the way we talk about it in the C suite. It's becoming incredibly difficult for us to continue using the same tools that we had, right? Like strategies that we used previously, they're not working anymore. So it's an interesting time.
Let's get into that because we got to figure our way out of the fog here a little bit, right? Here's what I want to do. There was, I think, a study that kind of sets the tone for our conversation here. It was called the trust gap, and it was done a little over a year ago. And it identified something really interesting. 74% of B2B buyers don't trust the customer evidence that we present to them. This idea of trust in B2B, in ABM, it's a relationship based business. If we don't have trust, our brands are trust marks. So we have an identity crisis as companies. We have an identity crisis as marketers leading the charge in our organizations. This is not a small topic. Here's what I want to ask you is, what do you believe is the core reasons behind the issues here? The trust gap as we talk about it. What's driving that?
Yeah, there are a lot of factors. I think in many ways, the sources of authority that we would go to as our sources of truth are under question. News now is more fragmented. When we think about where we would go to look for information to make our, whether you call it your buyer's decision journey, or whether you would go to look for information to figure out how do you source particular piece of information, all of those, we went from not having enough information to having way too much information. The information is now fragmented. Beyond being fragmented now, there is a lack of trust in the sources of information. We then went to, we had third party validation through, did we then trust whether it's the analyst firms, or maybe we were trusting the reviewers, or maybe we were trusting said influencers? Every time we tried to create these pockets of high authority centers of trust that would help drive people towards a particular decision criteria, it didn't land, it didn't stick, because we would end up with yet more piece of information. Now, with the augment of having direct access for both the consumers, like the users of the product, to the buyers of the product, to the providers of a product or a service, all of the intermediaries and all of the channels now are coming under threat. So, is there a reason for that? There's too much for our consumers, our customers to navigate, for them to go from point A to point B. And so, in that environment, how do you make a decision? And then when you layer on top of that the pressures of, like, when you're an enterprise in a B2B environment, when you layer on top of that this cost pressures that every single enterprise is faced with, right? There's a lot of tension and pressure on making a decision. So people are avoiding making decisions. It's almost the risk that is just too high to make a wrong decision. So it's almost better to not do something than to make a wrong decision. And that's adding to the entire equation in itself. And it's leading to people like waiting instead of moving forward and making the right decision. The entire decision making framework is at threat because of that.
It's interesting. There was a conversation I had recently, and the analogy that was given to me was another B2B CMO. And he said, we're making decisions. We're asking our buyers to make decisions at such a rapid pace. And hang on, we're in the ABM model here. This could take 8 months. This could take a year. And he says, I know. He says, but we're making decisions every single day. The velocity, the number, and the amount of decisions that we're making. And think about it. Like, all of us, we are B2B buyers. Last time that you added to your tech stack, guess what? You were the B2B buyer, right? And you're not a professional buyer, right? That's not what you do for a living, right? You run marketing in your organization. And on the side, you've got to make these big decisions, right? As you're in this fast pace of the constant decision making you're at, is that velocity can be our worst enemy, right? You should think about it. Think about what can go bad, what can go wrong when you're going 75 miles an hour on the freeway versus 10 miles an hour in your driveway. Velocity can really lead to bad things. And he said, if we're in this fast paced world that we're trying to make decisions, we're going to default to the decisions we're comfortable with. We're going to default to the people that we're comfortable doing business with, the name that we're comfortable doing business with, right? How do we become part of that inner circle of who we're trusted, right? If we can do that, our conversion rates are going to go way up. So now the question is, how do we become part of that, right? So this is the question. How do we navigate this self-discovery journey that they're on, where they're making all their own decisions? By the time they even get to us, right? They've got their short list of 2 or 3, and they've got their winner in mind before they start kicking the tires and actually wanting to talk to us. How do we earn the trust to get into that small elite group at the end?
How do you go from the winner circle to the inner circle?
This is a good way.
Yeah.
Like, knowing that's the world we live in now, right? We get ourselves into that elite group that is actually going to be the people they want to talk about. Or maybe another way to think about that is, how do we get earlier and earlier in the buyer's decision with them in the buyer journey? Like, how do we have that conversation actually with them before they pick their finalist, right? Once they pick the finalist, that's going to be really hard to break into.
We talk about this all the time with our teams. I think previously the traditional model was, right, like you follow the funnel. right? But now it's impossible for you to wait and see. There's no such thing as creating demand in many ways, right? If you're not talking to your potential customer base, even before they know that you're their target partner to solve a particular problem, you've lost them. You have to grow with them as they're growing their business model. You have to attach yourself to their business journey and their life cycle, which is why I think going back to the identity crisis of the marketing function within a company, there's nobody else within an organization that knows how to be an advocate for your customer better than the marketing. We're the ones who are always talking about it's not about us, it's about them. Your customer is the reason why we're in business. Like their business is our business in so many ways. And how do you help figure out your business model to almost map and grow along with your ecosystems of your client bases or your customer bases? And how do you figure out your inflection points in the market along with the growth curves and the milestones of your customers so that, that commitment to your customers' growth is at the heart of your entire existence, right? And there's nobody else advocating for that within your business better than your marketing stakeholder within your company. And if that's not part of your rhythm and if that's not part of your go to market engine, it's really difficult to orchestrate that as a add on to your go to market motion. Then trust becomes baked into every single engagement that you're having with those clients. That way, you're never talking about a prospect. Every prospect is a future client at that point, right? Because you're just growing with the way your vertical is growing or your segment is growing.
I have to tell you, I've had over 160 different interviews with B2B C-suite executives. And you just said something that made more sense than I've heard so far. You said, how do we become advocates for our customers? We're sellers right now, right? We're selling organizations, right? That's what we do. That's why we have an issue, right? We're going to position ourselves in the best light. But the idea here is if we can position ourselves not as sellers, but as advocates, and guess what? We come alongside with that transcends the Gartner trusted advisor, right? I want to hear more about this idea of advocacy. It's so intriguing.
We talk about it, right? We've heard the importance of authenticity, like we've heard the importance of personalization. It's the holy grail. We hear about how cold email and cold prospecting is dead. They're all signaling the same thing. Like everyone is looking for a champion. Everyone's looking for their champion. And if we're able to demonstrate that we're in business to help them win, then we win together. We say that internally, right? In every sales kickoff, every year when you do your internal rally cry, you talk about one team that wins together. It doesn't have to be an internal rally cry. It should be an external rally cry as well for our customers. I think there are some companies that do it very well with their partner organizations where they have a really strong partner ecosystem and partner go to market. But it's that same concept of extending to their customers as well, where we say, what's your business rhythm? How can we help you win? Where can we attach ourselves to it? We can figure out the sales motion around it if need be. But let's first solve your problem and the business will take care of itself. The consulting industry does that to a certain extent. And maybe that's the same mindset that maybe we can look at attaching for even the product companies. Like the whole notion of building a roadmap together, co innovating together, the notion of bringing a team that is aligned to making a customer successful in a particular implementation where we create a custom solution for our clients and then we scale with you, whatever it may be for a particular business. But your entire marketing function is not, it's not just about the promotional aspect. But how do you build an entire campaign for that customer? That is ABM beyond the promotional aspect of ABM. That's when you win their trust, when you're committed to putting resources behind it as well. But that takes a lot of alignment with leadership. It's a huge lift. It's not going to get executed if it doesn't have alignment from the top. And maybe it's something you do for a few specific accounts, and then you figure out how you scale. But looking at ABM beyond promotion, beyond gifting, like beyond microsite and targeted messaging, but truly building your product, your program, your business model beyond just the marketing and campaign portion of it is what helps you win.
I think we're all 100% bought in with you, right? I love this idea of being the advocate of the customer. Is this also a true statement? The way that you are going to become the best advocate for your customer is to understand your customer better than your competition. That has to be foundational underneath this. And is that foundational to be that advocate?
Absolutely. It starts with that, right? Like you 100% have to understand them. You have to be embedded in their core needs. You have to understand them better, maybe than their competition, which means you have to understand the entire ecosystem that they operate in. You have to be open to communicating, which means there is a level of transparency that is required on both sides. There's a level of commitment that is needed, and there's a level of openness to feedback that is required on both sides, right? Both to learn and be open to the feedback that you receive, and also to provide the feedback based on what you're hearing. Because many a times, what we hear too is our customers, they are hungry for insights themselves, because it's really like your external antenna. It's hard for you to know, to have your finger on the external world. And you then end up becoming that trigger of information from the outside to them. And the insights that you can provide become invaluable for them to make certain business decisions that then make them trust you even more. And so, always looking and figuring out what are those insights you can bring to them because of your place in their business is super valuable.
So, what you just said is hard. I'm going to give you another example of how hard this is. Usually, what we do in the world of ABM is we take those insights and that understanding, that advocacy you're talking about, and it's what Forrester calls the foundation for ABM, which is content, right? Like we share content that helps them, right? So there was a recent article that came out from Forbes. There was a study that was in this article that it graded B2B content. Okay. It gave it a grade like we were back in school, right? You know what the grade was? All B2B content.
Gosh,
So I'm gonna tell you
that's
because you're never gonna guess because you're gonna be disgusted, right? It was a D minus. They graded B2B content as a D minus because it didn't help. Like we are thought leaders of our own products, our own service, our own tech. We could talk all day, right? We could talk all day about what we do, and that's what we do, right? Here's my next question is my belief is that we have a really deep, meaningful familiarity with our customers. We talk about everything in terms of like their challenges from what we do for them, what our product, our tech does for them. And it might be a meaningful, like this much of their total challenges that are this much. But we talk about this because this is the world we live in, right? But what you're talking about, I think, is being meaningful and advocacy. You got to understand this. And that
yeah.
takes work. That takes effort, resources. So how do we learn this? How do we like focus on this? Like in when we're comfortable focusing on this right here.
It all comes down to trade-offs, right? Going back to my tech optimism, I think this is where we have a great opportunity. AI couldn't have come at a better time. And maybe this is where we get really smart about using technology and figuring out how could we apply that internally so that we figure out a way to make that trade-off feel less painful than it needs to be? Because you're absolutely right. It is an investment of time, it's an investment of resources. It's costly when you think about it from a people resource standpoint. Again, if you are looking to grow your business with your biggest clients and you're looking to grow share of wallet, and we see this data over and over again, it is more profitable in the long term. And you can do the numbers for your individual business. If you are over your customer lifetime value, numbers will tell you it is better to invest with clients and accounts that grow with you over time. Wouldn't it be better to invest a portion of it in becoming true experts of your client's business and investing time in better understanding their business, creating opportunities, figuring out solutions that you can then provide answers for, and serving that up as a solution to them as part of the other offers that you provide, and then creating a revenue line for yourself around it? Companies that evolve from being just one product provider to providing like services and service lines around it are the ones that figure out how to grow with their customers. And that's what it means, right? Like you have to figure out ways in which you attach yourself to your clients and grow with them. Understanding your business, like truly running deep analytics on it, you run into questions that requires your customer to share data with you. It requires them to trust you for you to have access to that information. It requires a level of trust again for you to have access to that and to be able to provide that level of insight for it to be meaningful. And I think that's where, that content becomes less meaningful is when you're doing it from the outside and then it becomes cookie cutter compared to what you're finding. Those are some of the things that you might have to work with. And this is where working with partners and building an ecosystem around your customer base may be useful. Maybe there are industry groups where there is a way for you to gather data that is anonymized, and yet you're able to provide insights and data that could apply to your customer's business, and the insights could be applicable in that way. That's another angle to it. Either ways, I think the trade-offs of figuring out, are you looking for a short-term gain or are you looking to grow with your customers over the long term? It's a strategic decision that your C-suite and the board has to make.
Here's the thing. I've never met a company that said, I don't want to be customer obsessed. Your idea of investment there is if we went to our executive suite or in our board meetings and we said, our goal is to invest in our customers. Our goal is to invest in being advocates for our customers, which means our goal is to invest in learning and talking with our customers and doing it on a regular basis. That's the foundation to our go-to-market plan. So there was a woman, she was two-time B2B CMO. She was a former salesperson. She was a chief experience officer. Like, she's got a really well-rounded. And her perspective was, we need to listen more. If we invest in listening, that will drive differentiation. That will drive innovation. So if we're going to invest anywhere, let's invest in listening with our customers, right? Like, I think you have echoed that so eloquently in such a different way, this idea of customer advocacy. So I'm going to say one thing and then I'm going to ask you my last question. All right. I have such a great job. I get to talk to people like you. So here's this woman, the chief customer officer at BlackBerry. So she was head of the customer support group. And she said, Steve, each member of my team is attributed to bringing in over $2 million a year in revenue. Each person in the sales group, they're attributed to bringing in over $200,000 a year. We have our customers calling us just to spitball with us, just to run ideas by us, right?
Wow.
And you know why? Because of what you said. Because they are true advocates for their customers.
That's amazing.
And that's a massive difference. That is a transformational difference That's not a organization focused on sales. That's an organization focused on customer advocacy. I think what you said here today in different words, but I just wanted to put like an outside perspective on what you're saying and your point of view here is it works.
It's hard to get buy-in though, and it's hard to get past the chase of the quarter. It's hard because it takes investment of dollars, and it's really the reality of going up in front of your board and asking for investment dollars on a listening program for your to better understand your customers. It's tough, which is why the more we can get buy-in among senior leadership, the more we can get people understanding the value behind it, the better it is for all of us.
Here's what I'm going to say. Our original topic, if we think way back to half an hour, our original topic was this identity crisis. You just flipped it around 180 degrees. As if we take our rightful role as being the leaders of advocates for our customers, guess what? That translates then into how do we work with sales? How do we work with customer success? How do we work with operations? How do we work with product? All of us. But if we lead as the voice of the customer to be an advocate, then maybe think about our role as the voice of the customer as a service. Every other department in the organization gives us a whole new level of identity in the business.
Love it. And figuring out like how do we that's exactly it. How do we help every single piece of the business? We talk about being customer centric. We can help them understand what it means for them to be customer centric. And we can help them and help give them that identity.
I think that's the perfect place for me to say, I'm sure there's going to be more questions that people have. Would it be appropriate if I gave out your LinkedIn profile so people could reach out and ask questions?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'd love to talk about this all day, every day.
I want to thank you because the goal of this podcast is just to bring in different perspectives, right? Different perspectives about how do we help each other be more successful. And the way I like to think of it is if we all can do that, then that's a part of the rising tide that lifts all boats. So I think today you were a massive part of that rising tide. And I just wanted to say thank you for coming on and doing that.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you for creating this platform for us to have these important conversations.